Let's talk about a massive shift happening right under our noses on the global energy map. With all the instability in the Middle East, a huge question keeps coming up. Could Russia step in and become China's ultimate energy provider? Let's get into it. On the surface, it seems like such a simple question with an obvious answer, right? I mean, Russia has all the resources, China has this huge growing demand. It looks like a perfect match made in geopolitical heaven. But as you're about to see, the real story is, well, it's way more complicated than that. In fact, if you talk to energy analysts, they'll tell you that believing Russia is the simple answer to China's problems is probably the single most dangerous assumption you could make in the energy markets right now. So, in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why that is.
Okay, but first, let's be fair. We need to understand why this idea is so tempting to believe in the first place. The simple story, the one you hear pretty much everywhere, is incredibly convincing. And it's built on some really powerful-looking numbers.
To make sense of all this, let's use a simple analogy. Just imagine China's massive energy demand is like a giant weekly grocery run. For decades, the Middle East has been its go-to supermarket. But lately, that supermarket has seemed a little shaky. And right next door, Russia is waving China over, saying, "Hey, over here, we've got everything you need and the shelves are always full." And at first glance, it really does look like a fantastic deal. Let's just look at the raw numbers. By 2025, Russia was already supplying 17.4% of all of China's crude oil imports. That made it their #1 single supplier. Yeah, even bigger than Saudi Arabia. And then things went into overdrive. In early 2026, the amount of energy flowing through pipelines from Russia to China just shot up by a staggering 40.9%. Now, we're not talking about a little trickle here. This was a flood. And the real cherry on top? This massive deal for the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. It promises to deliver an extra 50 billion cubic meters, that's BCM, of natural gas every single year. So you look at all these numbers, and the story seems pretty clear. Russia is the answer. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast, because this is where we hit the reality check. You see, hiding behind all those big, impressive numbers are some very hard limits. We're talking physical, strategic, and even technological limits that completely flip the script. There are 3 fundamental constraints that the simple story just totally ignores. First, the physical limits of the actual infrastructure. You can only pump so much through a pipe. Second, China's own strategic energy rules. And third, these huge technological roadblocks that have been put up by sanctions. Okay, first, let's just wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the problem. The Middle East provides over half, a massive 52% of China's imported crude oil. Russia, even as the biggest single country, is only at 17.4%. You just can't replace a 52% supplier with a 17% supplier overnight. The pipes, the ports, they just don't exist. The basic math doesn't work. And on top of those physical limits, China actually has a core strategic rule designed to prevent this exact situation. It's an energy doctrine that basically says they should cap imports from any one country at 15%. Why? To avoid becoming too dependent on anyone. And here's the kicker. Russia is already over that limit. Beijing's letting it slide for now, but pushing that number even higher, that goes directly against China's own national security playbook. So if the pipelines are maxed out, what about shipping gas on boats? Well, for that, you need what's called liquefied natural gas, or LNG. And Russia had this grand plan to triple its LNG exports. But Western sanctions have completely blocked its access to the specialized technology it needs to build new LNG facilities. So key projects are just stalled, and analysts now call Russia's LNG dreams highly unrealistic. So you take all these constraints and you put them together, and you get to the most surprising part of this whole story, a complete power shift. With Russia basically boxed in, the entire dynamic has flipped. It's not Russia holding all the cards anymore, it's China. This table really captures the new reality perfectly. Look at Russia's position. It lost its massive European gas market, so it is desperate for a new major buyer. Now look at China. Sure, it needs energy, but it has other options. This situation effectively makes China the buyer of last resort, and that gives Beijing all the negotiating power. And you can bet Beijing is using that power to drive an incredibly hard bargain. Reports are suggesting that China is pushing for prices around $3.50 per million BTU. Now, to put that in perspective, that is a brutally low price. It's actually close to what Russian domestic customers pay, and it's just a tiny fraction of what Europe used to pay. As analysts have put it, this is not a partnership of equals. The quote is, "This deal serves China's interests, not Russia's bottom line." So Russia isn't making a huge profit here. It's basically just trying to stop the financial bleeding. And if you want the ultimate proof, you just have to follow the money. Look at the stock market. When that huge Power of Siberia 2 deal was announced, what do you think happened to Gazprom's stock? Did it soar? Nope. It actually dropped 3%. The market, it understood immediately that this was a move of desperation, not strength. It was a bad deal for Russia. So this all brings us to the verdict, and it takes us right back to that dangerous assumption we started with. The idea that Russia can just waltz in and solve China's energy problem isn't just a little wrong. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the hard limits at play. This chart really sums it all up perfectly. Can Russia help fill a potential energy gap for China? Yes, absolutely, but only partially. It can probably offset maybe 20 to 30% of a major shortfall, but that leaves a massive 70 to 80% structural gap that simply cannot be filled by Russia alone. So the final takeaway is this. Russia is a vital partner for China, no doubt, but it's the convenience store, not a replacement for the main supermarket. The geography, the pipeline capacity, and China's own strategic rules mean that Russia can never, ever fully replace that huge energy supply coming from the Gulf. This isn't just an opinion. It's a matter of physics and policy. So we end right back where we began. Can Russia solve China's energy problem? The evidence seems pretty clear. Not alone. Not this decade. And given the very real constraints we've just walked through, maybe not ever. And that reality has some pretty profound consequences for all of us.